They say when you marry someone, you don't just marry them. You marry their country, their customs, their ghosts. I suppose I believed I could handle that once. At 24, with a suitcase full of dreams and heartache I hadn't yet learned how to carry properly, I flew from the soft-spoken landscapes of Oregon into the rugged, sun-washed hills of Sicily, straight into the arms of a man who promised forever. I am 38 now, and that forever feels like a cage. My name is Elena. I founded a travel company 7 years ago, mostly because I needed an excuse to leave the house. My husband, Marco, used to admire that independence until he stopped. At first, his jealousy seemed flattering, like a hot-blooded spark unique to his Sicilian charm. But over the years, it evolved into something colder, heavier. The kind of weight you don't notice until it's wrapped around your ankles, pulling you under with every small decision you're no longer allowed to make. He monitors everything now. The clothes I wear, the friends I keep, even my grocery lists are under scrutiny. Once, he questioned the presence of a lemon-scented hand soap in the shopping bag. "Who are you trying to impress with this?" he had asked, his eyes dark as the espresso he drinks in silence every morning. I laughed, nervously. But the laughter didn't reach him. I tell myself this is love, that deep down he's afraid of losing me. But each year, that story becomes harder to sell to myself. In the middle of this tightly wound life, there is one breath of fresh air. My son, Luca, is 17 now. He's been playing football since he could walk, practically. There are grass stains and medals in every drawer of his room. These days, he's taller than Marco, broader too, muscles shaped by effort, by ambition, by freedom. He carries a kindness in his eyes, one that Marco never learned how to possess. And he sees me. Not just the woman who raised him, but the woman who cries when she thinks no one is listening. He hears my tears through the thin walls. He doesn't say much, but when I pass him in the hall, sometimes his hand brushes mine, a silent promise. I see you. I'm here. Our connection has grown, quietly and without apology. He brings me coffee in the mornings now, like he's reversing the roles, easing some of the burden I never asked him to carry. He tells me that love doesn't have to feel like a prison. That control is not proof of affection. And I listen. One Sunday afternoon, he came to me, eyes glowing with anticipation. "Mom," he said, "we have a match next week. Big one. I want you there." "Did you tell your father?" He shook his head.
"No, just you."
"I want you to see me." I should have hesitated, but I didn't. I just nodded, my heart fluttering in a way that felt new and terrifying. The stadium was half filled when I arrived, the sky a dull gray curtain overhead. But the moment I saw Luca on the field, his jersey stretched over powerful shoulders, captain's band wrapped proudly around his arm, I forgot the weather. I forgot everything but him. He was magnificent, commanding, not just my boy anymore, but a leader, a force. And every time his eyes flicked toward the stands and found me, I felt it in my chest, a small fire, burning away the fog. They won. He ran to me after the final whistle, and without a second's pause, lifted me off the ground in a fierce hug. I laughed, breathless. He held me for a moment longer than necessary, then took my hand and pulled me toward the rest of the team. "This is my mom," he said, beaming. "Isn't she beautiful?" The world tilted. I felt my cheeks flush as a few of his teammates offered polite greetings, but all I could focus on was the way he looked at me, like I was more than just a parent, like I was someone he admired, someone he was proud to claim. Later that night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window with a glass of red wine, staring at the outline of the olive trees, their silhouettes shivering in the breeze. Something inside me had shifted. I felt it every time I remembered his voice calling me beautiful. Every time I closed my eyes and saw the pride in his face. Something had begun. Something my husband would never understand. and something I wasn't sure I could stop. After that match, something in the house began to feel altered. Not changed by force, but gently, like the way autumn doesn't ask permission before it paints the leaves gold. Luca and I drifted closer, orbiting each other with unspoken ease. There were no words for it then, only 1,000 small moments that threaded us together with invisible string. He started coming into the kitchen in the mornings, not just for coffee, but to sit, to talk. He'd lean against the counter, still sleepy, his hair tousled from sleep, and just watch me. Not in the way Marco did, sharp-eyed and possessive, but with softness, like he was seeing me beyond the roles I had been forced to play. "Your eyes are sad again," he said one morning, his voice low, still scratchy from sleep. I paused, knife in hand halfway through slicing strawberries. "They're always sad when you talk to Dad," he added, reaching across the counter to take one of the slices. "Don't say that." "It's true." I didn't know how to respond. It was true. My husband's love, if that's still what it was, had become a collar I didn't know how to remove. But Luca, he was sunlight sneaking into locked rooms. We started taking walks in the evenings, a quiet ritual born from restless energy. Sometimes he'd lace his fingers behind his head, his shoulders loose and free, and talk about the future, his dreams, his plans, the life he wanted to build far away from the heavy shadows of this house. "Would you come with me?" he asked once, almost playfully. I smiled, pretending not to take him seriously. "And leave your father?" "Exactly." There was something in his voice that made the air shift. A flicker of something bold, dangerous. I laughed it off, but that night I stared at the ceiling until sunrise, his words echoing like an invitation. Marco began to notice. He always did, eventually. His moods turned colder, his silences sharper. He accused me of ignoring him. "You're different lately," he said one night, slamming his glass on the table. "I see it." "You think I don't see it?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Silence has its own kind of rebellion. Luca noticed the tension, and he became more protective, checking in on me after his father left for work, texting me throughout the day, slipping into my room in the evenings just to sit, just to be there. One night, after a particularly cruel argument, I found him waiting for me in the garden. He didn't say anything, just opened his arms, and I collapsed into them. He held me for a long time, his chin resting on top of my head, his arms strong and sure. "You're not alone," he whispered. That was when I realized how much I had come to depend on him. Not just as my son, but as my safe place. My anchor. We started cooking together, simple things at first, just for fun. Pancakes on Sundays. Pasta after his training sessions. He would tease me when I added too much garlic, and I would roll my eyes when he used every pan in the kitchen. We laughed, loud and unguarded, and I began to feel something I hadn't felt in years. Joy. One evening, I spilled flour on my blouse, and he reached over to brush it off. His fingers lingered. Our eyes met. The moment stretched, too full, too quiet. I looked away first, heart hammering like I had just run a mile. I was ashamed of the fluttering in my chest. And yet, when he brushed against me in the narrow kitchen, or when his gaze lingered too long, I didn't move. I couldn't. I was caught between guilt and longing, unsure which one hurt more. Then came the night of the storm. It started with distant thunder, low and growling, crawling over the hills like something alive. Marco was away, some business trip in Palermo, and the house felt both too big and too intimate all at once. The lights flickered, then went out entirely. Luca came into my room with a flashlight, his smile easy. "Looks like it's just us." We lit candles in the living room, the warm glow casting long shadows on the walls. We played cards, talked about nothing and everything. He sat close, closer than usual, and I didn't ask him to move. At one point, I yawned, and he leaned over, brushing a strand of hair from my face. Tired. A little. His hand didn't move right away, and I didn't pull back. The silence returned, heavier now, filled with everything we weren't saying. I could feel his breath, slow and warm. Our eyes met again, and for one terrifying moment, I didn't see my son. I saw a man, one who knew me, one who chose me. But then I stood quickly. I should sleep. He nodded, his expression unreadable. Good night, Mom. I climbed the stairs with trembling hands, my heart in chaos. And when I closed my bedroom door behind me, I leaned against it, tears slipping silently down my cheeks. Not because I was afraid, but because I wasn't. There are moments in a woman's life when a decision presses against her like the weight of 1,000 nights, when one look, one breath, one reckless spark can change everything. That moment had been building in my life like pressure behind glass. And Luca, my son, my heart, my unraveling, was the one tapping gently on the cracks. After the storm, I tried to restore distance. I told myself the silence between us that night was just a dream, a trick of candlelight and vulnerability. But truth has a strange way of clinging. And Luca was persistent. He started bringing up America. You could go back, he said one day while we walked in the vineyard behind our house. Start over. You'd be happy there. I gave a tired smile. And leave your father?
He stopped walking.
He's not your home. He's your prison. I didn't reply. The truth in his words hung between us, heavy with things we couldn't say aloud. You stayed for me, he continued, his voice softer now. But I'm grown, Mom.
I can take care of myself.
What about you? Who takes care of you? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because somewhere deep inside I knew no one had, not really for a very long time. That evening, while I prepared dinner, Marco stormed into the kitchen without warning. He had returned early from his trip. What is this? He barked, holding up a hotel receipt. You took the car? You didn't tell me? My hands trembled, but I met his eyes. I went to the coast with a client. You knew I had meetings.
His jaw tightened.
You're dressing differently. You're acting strange. Don't think I don't notice. Before I could respond, Luca stepped in from the hallway. She can go wherever she wants. Marco's eyes narrowed. Watch your tone. I'm not a child, Luca snapped. No, Marco said slowly, his voice coiled tight with warning. But you're still under my roof. That night, the house felt split down the middle. On one side, Marco, jealous, boiling, unpredictable. On the other, Luca, calm, watchful, simmering with something just as dangerous. I stayed in my room, but my thoughts stayed with Luca. A few days passed. The air between us throbbed with unspoken tension. I avoided being alone with him.
Or tried to.
But one evening, while Marco was out visiting a neighbor, Luca came into my room. He didn't knock. I mean it, he said, standing by the window. You don't have to live like this anymore. I sat on the bed, too tired to argue. It's not that simple. It is. I could help. We could go anywhere. You're not trapped. Luca, my voice cracked. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and knelt before me, his hands gently resting on my knees. His eyes, those impossibly familiar eyes, looked up at me with such fierce devotion that I forgot how to breathe. You don't see yourself, do you? He whispered. You don't see what I see. You deserve to be loved in freedom, not fear. His hand moved to my cheek, and I didn't stop him. He leaned in, closer than he ever had before. His breath touched my lips. Luca, I whispered, barely able to say it. I'm not afraid, he replied. Are you? And then he kissed me. It wasn't soft. It wasn't uncertain. It was real. And everything inside me shattered. For one fragile heartbeat, the world stood still, until a sound outside the door tore through the moment like a blade. Footsteps. Heavy. Familiar.
Marco.
Luca pulled back, eyes wide, breath sharp. He stood, quick and quiet, and stepped to the window, pretending to adjust the curtain. The door creaked open. Marco stepped in, frowning. "What are you doing here?" Luca didn't flinch. "We were talking." Marco's eyes flicked to me. My hands were trembling. "Talking?" His voice dripped with suspicion. "Late at night, in her bedroom?" "I'm not a child anymore," Luca said again, but this time it felt like a warning. Marco stared at him for a long, blistering second, then turned and left without another word. The door closed. The silence returned. But nothing felt the same. Luca turned to me. His face was unreadable.
"We have to go," he said.
"Soon." And this time I didn't say no. There's a strange kind of stillness before you make the decision that changes everything. A quiet, suspended breath. The sound of your own heartbeat in your ears, your hands trembling not from fear, but from the weight of finally choosing yourself. I felt it the night Luca and I left. We waited until Marco's routine was unbreakably fixed, his weekly poker game with friends in the hills, too far to rush back from without warning. I'd packed only what I needed. 2 dresses, a book I hadn't finished, the passport I'd kept hidden since the day I moved here. Everything else, the kitchen I made mine, the wedding band that felt more like a chain, stayed behind. Luca had arranged everything. He had rented a car under a friend's name, mapped a route through the old countryside roads. His bag was small, just cleats, a toothbrush, and a folded photo of the 2 of us from when he was a child. I couldn't look at it without tears. "Are you sure?" I asked as we stood by the gate in the darkness, the scent of rosemary and dust filling the air. "This will change your life." He didn't hesitate. "You are my life." We drove through the night, headlights cutting ribbons through the Sicilian fog. The mountains loomed like sentinels on either side, quiet witnesses to our escape. We barely spoke, but every moment was electric with possibility. For the first time in 17 years, I didn't feel like someone's possession. I felt like someone who had chosen and who had been chosen back. But Marco was never the kind of man to be left. It began with a phone call. Unknown number. I didn't answer. Then another. Then a message, one that made my stomach drop. "You think I won't find you? You've taken him from me. You'll regret this." I showed it to Luca. He looked at me calmly, but I could see the fire in his eyes. "He's losing control," he said. "That's all this is." But we both knew Marco's pride was deeper than that. His need to possess what he feared losing had driven him before, and now it had nowhere to go but rage. We crossed into northern Italy by morning, the sun rising in streaks of blood orange over the horizon. Luca held my hand at stoplights. I caught him watching me while I slept, as if reassuring himself I was still there, still beside him. But then, somewhere near the outskirts of Verona, we saw it. The black car. Too familiar. Tailgating. I froze. "Don't stop," I whispered. "I won't," he said, jaw clenched, knuckles white on the wheel. For an hour, we drove. Past vineyards and villages, winding up narrow mountain roads. I don't remember breathing. I only remember Luca's hand finding mine, squeezing it like a promise. When Marco's car disappeared behind a sharp curve, Luca took a sudden turn, speeding down a dirt road between 2 farms. We parked behind an old stone barn, engine cut. The silence roared. "He'll follow the main road," Luca said. "He doesn't know this trail." We waited. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Nothing. Only wind through the olive trees. We stayed there until dusk, hidden, wrapped in silence and tension, until I leaned my head on Luca's shoulder, overwhelmed not by fear, but by relief. We were going to make it. That night, we crossed into Switzerland. A small town near Lake Lugano took us in like a secret. We used different names. I opened a small consultancy for travel firms. Luca signed with a local football academy. The days were simple, quiet, almost gentle. He cooked breakfast now. I laughed again. I wore sundresses without fear. Sometimes, I'd still check over my shoulder, expecting to see Marco in a crowd, behind a corner. But he never came. Maybe he knew he had already lost. One afternoon, I stood by the lake while Luca came up behind me, slipping his arms around my waist. "You don't regret it?" he asked. I turned, looking up at the man my son had become. "No," I said. "I only regret not leaving sooner." And then I kissed him, no longer afraid, because we had already crossed the line, and we were never going back.